Episode number 309, Mastering Live Streaming with Brad Zimmerman. Part 2. Let's do it.
This is the definitive podcast for helping you plan, create, and execute dynamic worship experiences at your church. Useful, practical content in the areas of production, worship, communications, first impressions, and more. This is Making Sunday Happen.
Hey guys, welcome to the podcast this week. I love getting to talk to you guys each week. You are on the front lines of ministry every single week at your church. You are in the trenches. You're figuring out how to plan, create, and execute your worship experiences on the weekend. Keep up the great work that you are doing. It is seen and it is making an impact. Way to go. All right, today on the podcast, we will wrap our conversation with Brad Zimmerman. Brad is the creative director at Watermark Church in Grand Haven, Michigan. You might also know Brad as the ProPresenter guy. He's done a lot of tutorial videos for Renewed Vision and others. So we'll dive right in mid-conversation with Brad, talking about more innovative ways to take your live stream or your online worship experience up a notch. So if you missed part 1 of this series with Brad, feel free to jump back to episode number 308 of our show. And you can see that episode and over 300 others in the archives at makingsundayhappen.com. Again, that URL is makingsundayhappen.com. And let me point out a few episodes of the podcast that you might have missed over the last couple of months. So if you go to that site, makingsundayhappen.com, all of the archive episodes, all the way down to the very first one that we've done, is right there for you. So the last couple of months, we've had guests like Todd Elliott from Philo, my pastor friend Paul Wingfield from White Flag Church, the top leadership of the NRB, the National Religious Broadcasters. We've had Phil Joel, who is the bassist for the Newsboys and lead singer of the band Zealand. We've had Dr. Gary Chapman, Love Languages guy. We've had my buddy Ronnie Phillips Jr. from Abba's House. He's the senior pastor there in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and more. So if you've missed an episode, jump back in your feed and watch or listen to those. We're bringing you guys and girls on the show that are much, much smarter than I am, and we pray that the content on the show will help you as you enhance your worship experiences at your church. Well, let's jump right back into my conversation with Brad Zimmerman from Watermark Church right after this.
We've listened to church staff and volunteers just like you, and we've responded with our most comprehensive and customizable version yet. It's stable, it's powerful, and it's easy to use. You'll find intuitive tools like Sermon Builder, customizable plugins, and a refined slide editor, all backed by our amazing customer support made of pastors, techs, and volunteers available when you need them. It's everything you need to create powerful presentations while saving you time. Introducing Media Shout 7.
All right, so let's walk through 10 questions about live streaming.
Yeah.
For churches who are continuing to up their game, like we've kind of framed this. So let's continue to frame it in a way that churches are live streaming. We're assuming that they are, and they're not going back. So let's kind of start from the elementary level and talk about tools, and then we can kind of go from there. So what free streaming tools are available? And this might give some people, I'm sure they found some by now, but this might give some opportunity as they go to 2.0.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, OBS is is kind of the staple that most people have probably already found. If you're trying to live stream, you're going to use OBS. Stepping up from there, I would encourage you to look at dedicated hardware. I am all about hardware encoders. I think they are the best way to go because you are taking your points of failure and separating them out. Instead of having a computer that could crash because of an update to software, you now have a piece of hardware and its only job is to encode a live stream and send it live. And so switching from software-based encoding to hardware-based encoding, it can do some is a great step up. ProPresenter now has live streaming built into it, makes it really easy to have all of your stuff to be able to overlay graphics and not have to have a video switcher, or maybe you have a little ATEM mini and you can just switch between your 4 inputs, and then you can bring that into your ProPresenter computer and overlay all of that stuff in there. That makes it really simple as well. But a hardware encoder really is going to be the best choice for churches when you're streaming, just because you're not going to have to worry about failure as much as you do with a computer that's doing a lot of different things. And there's a lot of different reasons why you could have an issue where hardware is built to do one thing and to do it well.
So you got OBS, and then vMix is another one that you mentioned. People should know that is PC only, right? Yeah,
it's PC only. There's some reasons to go with it, but really, if you're looking to up your game, you're going to be looking to, how could I step away from OBS? How could I step away from vMix? What's that next step up? Mm-hmm. And that next step up really is moving away from a software package that's doing all of that to maybe some more dedicated pieces of hardware to handle that. So a hardware video switcher, maybe a hardware video going into that video switcher, and a hardware encoder. But yeah, vMix is another option. Wirecast is another option that is a paid piece of software. But again, I would be looking to get away from a piece of software that does it all and move to some dedicated pieces of hardware that does it really consistently for you.
Good. How much bandwidth do I need to stream?
So the rule of thumb is always double whatever your upload speed is. So if you're uploading HD, you're uploading about 5 megabits per second. So you need at minimum 10 megabits per second of upload speed. Just remember, those numbers that your internet service provider always touts usually are your download speeds. You get a gigabit downstream bandwidth. That doesn't mean you have a gigabit upstream bandwidth, or you have 100 megs or 200 megs down. Check and see what that upstream bandwidth, because a lot of times it's not the same, and a lot of times it's way smaller. Mm-hmm. And the reason that we want to do a double at minimum is because it fluctuates. They're not giving you consistently that amount of bandwidth. So you always want to at least be at double, if not like a quarter or 4 times, so that you're at a quarter of what you have available.
Let's talk about licensing. What licenses do I need to stream? This is going to get interesting.
Yeah, well, so it gets interesting because things have changed so much.
Yeah.
Pre-pandemic, CCLI never had a written out rule, and honestly, I don't even know if they still do have a written out rule about showing lyrics over your live stream. There was nowhere was it written whether or not that was allowed or not. You couldn't stream your stems. So if you were doing multi-tracks, you couldn't stream stems. There's a lot of things you couldn't do pre-pandemic that you can now do because of the pandemic. There's actually believe it or not, there's some good that came from all of this. And this is one of those good things. So now you do need to have a license. So CCLI has a streaming add-on that you can add to your license. This allows you to stream your band playing any of the songs in the CCLI catalog. So you cannot play a cover of a pop song that's not in the CCLI catalog, but you can play any song that's in the CCLI catalog with your live band. It also allows you to put lyrics over your live stream. And as far as all the requirements that go along with that, there's some other things going on there. There's another license that's called Worshipcast. It's from Christian Copyright Solutions. And that license allows you to stream any content from any of the major labels. So any of the major organizations, ASCAP, BMI, CSAC, all of those recording groups. So you can basically stream any song. The difference between the two licenses, one covers you for way more songs, but you can't do any video on demand stuff. So it's only live. You can't leave that video up. It's streamed once and only streamed. With the CCLI one, you have less songs that are available, but you can leave that up for video on demand viewing, and you can do podcasting with it. Those are the main 2 licenses. Now, what if you want to stream that song, that worship song that you put behind some video that you're showing at your church? Or what if you want to stream that video clip, that sermon illustration that your pastor's using that's from some movie? The answer to all of those things is don't do those things. You're going to run into issues. YouTube and Facebook and Twitch.tv and a lot of these platforms have automated features that go through and listen and look for audio and video that is copywritten, and they will either automatically give you a copyright strike, or they could automated pull your stream totally down. So they could say, you're playing copywritten material, I'm going to turn your stream off. Now, there's a lot of misinformation going on around Facebook a few months ago about what Facebook is doing with their automated approaches to live streaming and whether or not they're going to go against churches and if they're anti-church streaming and all of that kind of stuff. What the rules that Facebook recently changed were more about DJs who were live streaming DJ'd music and basically just playing straight up recordings of songs to a live stream without paying any licensing. And so it really has no effect on churches. What we are doing in the church, Facebook is not against. There's actually people who work for Facebook who are all about engaging the church audience, like Nona Jones. Mm-hmm. And so that's just some clarification on that, because there's a lot of misinformation going on around whether or not streams would get shut down for those different reasons. But you do need to be very careful about copywritten material. I tell my pastors, you're not allowed to show movie clips. You need to describe what happens in a movie scene, or we can put a still up of a scene from a movie and you can share, do you remember in blah, blah, blah movie when this happened? But we're not going to be showing that movie clip because that is illegal. There is no license that will allow you to do that without going to Disney or whoever to ask for permission. And guess what? That's a full-time job and you don't have time to do that. And you're most likely going to get a no. And so you need to stay away from all of that stuff. So that's some of the copyright stuff. I'm curious if you have any other thoughts. As you said, it could get interesting.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think the major thing that I tell churches is if you have a question about it, lean toward no.
Yep.
This is not a ask forgiveness before you ask permission kind of situation.
Yeah.
This is a don't do it if you don't know that you definitely can do it. And then, if you find out differently or want to go after it or want to, investigate that further, then do that. But don't, ask for forgiveness kind of situation. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, totally. And I think the reason why churches, think the other way is because we're so used to the reality that we've been in for years, which is if we do something illegal in a local church, as far as copyrights go, it would require a Disney lawyer to show up to our church in person to see what we're doing wrong. That's how they would know that we did something wrong. Now you are broadcasting to the internet where they can create automated systems that just check for it automatically without even thinking, and they can flag you for doing that thing wrong. And so it's just a very different thing that we're not used to, that when you start live streaming, you're inviting the whole world in, which is amazing. But it's also, you have to remember, you're inviting the whole world in to see what you're doing. And so when it comes to copyrights, you're inviting the whole world and everybody who created that content and would like to get paid for that content to see what you're doing with their content if you're stealing it.
So as a content provider for the Big C Church,
yeah,
and I work with other content providers, this can be a big thing even in ministry. We can stream that Chris Tomlin music video. We can take a video from Worship House or 1230 or Igniter or whoever else and just
you have to go check the rules for all of them.
We can rip it down from YouTube. I mean, it's on there, right?
Yeah, you can't.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think that it goes beyond movie clips. It goes to Christians who are creating content, that is their living, to create content for the church, that they cannot create more content for you if they go out of business.
Right.
And also too, it's a moral issue. Like, don't just rip down from YouTube. That's illegal. And it's on you to know that.
Yeah. We got to follow the 10 Commandments,
right.
and we can't pick and choose the moments where we agree with the 10 Commandments. And so we can't steal. It's just part of it.
So let's talk about ways to track. How do I track my attendance online?
So, everybody in the middle of the pandemic wanted to know how many people are still a part of my church. Are there people still there? How do, whatever. This is a very wildly speculative thing. I will say the first thing is never, ever, ever look at a 3-second video count from Facebook to figure out how many people are part of your church. Yeah. That is a wildly inaccurate stat that is not conclusive of how many people were watching your live stream. The only way that I suggest figuring out who's watching your live stream is both YouTube and Facebook. Facebook's made it actually harder to find this one recently with their change in their admin look and UI and all that kind of stuff. But both Facebook and YouTube have minute-by-minute view counts for your stream. You can go and look at your live stream, and it gives you a graph of here's how many viewers you had watching for the entire time. And what you need to do is go look at that and find your average of who was watching minute by minute. And that is the number of devices that we're watching. And then you got to use some common sense. And so in the middle of the pandemic, that number you could maybe multiply by 3 or 4, knowing that there were whole households watching that live stream together. I would say currently, and probably in the future, the most that you could multiply that number against is 1.5 or 2 at most. I would not go any higher than that personally. But again, this is a gray area where there is no perfect rule, but that's the way that you can find out who's watching. So if you go look at your minute by minute and you have fluctuations between 5 and 500, and then you see this flat line where it kind of stays the same and it sits constant at 50 people, 50 devices, and then you multiply that by 1.5 or maybe 1.7 or maybe 2, you could say that you had 200 individual people watching the stream. To be safe, what I would do is only ever count the number. Don't do a multiplier. Just always say, here's how many devices we're watching on a Sunday. And again, that is based off of your entire stream, finding the average kind of here's who was watching the whole time. Because we wouldn't say that somebody was a part of our church gathering in person if they walked through the doors, grabbed a treat, and walked out again. We would say that they weren't there, and we wouldn't count them. So why would you do the same for a video online?
Good. What are some best ways to communicate my stream? How do I get the word out? How do I advertise, promote?
So when you're doing this in the long run, so you've been doing this for a while, and how do you make your stream be a consistent thing? Some of it is changing just how your website is done. If your website is all about having people show up in person, you are missing out, because there are a whole ton of people who want to come check out your church online before they're ever going to walk through the doors. We saw this pre-pandemic, and you are going to see it post-pandemic. And so your website needs to be geared towards getting people not only to know who your church is, but have them watch your church before they show up in person. And so having those main call to actions on your homepage be all about, for us, our main 2 call to actions are watch online, RSVP to be in person, because we're doing RSVPs for people who are in person right now. And so those are our main 2 call to actions. So making sure that that's there. As far as communicating it the rest of the time, it's going to turn into noise if you send an email to your entire church every single week about your live stream, and they will unsubscribe from your email list. And that is not a helpful thing. So you need to be really careful about over communicating things that happen on a weekly basis. I would encourage you to communicate this in the long run. Find things that you can highlight. Just as much as you would do a ministry area highlight for kids or students, do an online highlight of interviews with people who are at home and stuff like that. That helps promote the live stream, encourages the community that's happening on the live stream, and also encourages people to show up and be a part of the live stream.
Yeah, good. All right, let's jump back to copyright for a few minutes. So what happens, I probably should have asked you this a few minutes ago, but what happens if I do get a copyright claim? If Facebook, YouTube, if they ding me and get a copyright claim? What do I do?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you from experience some different things that could happen. So one is their automated systems are really good. We had somebody playing just keyboard and a vocal playing a Hillsong worship song like after a message. No click track. They weren't playing to a metronome. It wasn't in the original key. And yet YouTube's system still caught it as us playing a Hillsong song and said, this content in your video is this Hillsong worship song. And so those systems are going to find copyright issues with your stream. It's inevitable. And what that means usually is that you just can't monetize your video. You can't add advertising to your video. And if it's going to be monetized, it's only going to be monetized by by YouTube for them only to make money. You're not going to make any revenue on it. I also would highly recommend that churches don't monetize their videos, because why are you going to force your church members to watch advertising for your church? I personally don't see a point in it. But that copyright claim isn't going to shut down your live stream. That's just going to remove monetization. The copyright claims or the copyright strikes, so there's a difference between a claim and a strike. The copyright strikes are what's going to be an issue. And those strikes can look like, you have your content can't be seen in certain countries, or this video is getting taken down altogether. Or if this happens a couple more times, your account is going to be removed and you can't stream anymore. All of those things are possible. And so like we said earlier, err on the side of no, err on the side of not doing the wrong stuff. There really isn't anything that you can do to prove it. You can't go to YouTube and say, I have this license. It says that I can do this. Yep, you have that license and it will hold up in court if YouTube or Facebook tried to sue you, but it's not going to get YouTube or Facebook to let you stream or do what you're doing. It's only to make sure you're doing the right stuff and make sure that you're covered and the right people are getting paid. It's not necessarily a guarantee that they're going to allow you to stream that content. Now, if you're streaming on another platform like Resi, you're not going to run into any of these issues because they don't have those algorithms that are going through and checking your streams to see if you're playing copyrighted content.
So what if I feel like I'm drowning? I don't know where to start. All this copyright stuff just seems so confusing to me. I don't even know where I can go. What would you tell me?
I would tell you first to get the CCLI streaming license. I would tell you second that if you can afford it, to go to Christian Copyright Solutions and pay for Worshipcast and have both of those licenses. And then I would tell you to have a conversation with the leadership, the leaders of your church, and say, there are copyright issues that we are going to run into if we do X, Y, and Z. If we play videos or audio that have copyright material in it. And so we need to stop doing that. And you need to get everyone on your church team on board with that. Because if you have a worship leader or a pastor or someone on your team who is saying, I don't care, that's dumb, that doesn't make any sense, we don't do that, you're going to run into issues and you're going to have problems with it. And so you need to help them understand the value of what's going on. And you can show them the numbers and say, hey, guess what? Yeah, people have come back in person, but we still have 25, we still have 50, we still have 75% of our people who are online, because there are churches that's the way it is right now. And I won't be shocked if it stays that way in the future, that you're going to see more of a hybrid between in-person and online. And so showing and saying, here's the value here. We're doing this. It's here to stay. You guys aren't telling me to stop tomorrow, and you'd be mad if we didn't stream next Sunday. So we have to be careful about this stuff. And then just avoid the issues. If you avoid the issues, you're not going to have to worry about all of this copyright stuff. And so you just have to really kind of sit down and say, we have to start changing the way we do production. We have to start changing the way we program things. We can't play a YouTube video for our worship set because we don't have a band this week. It means we don't do worship this week, and we just have a time of prayer, and we just do that instead. If you can't do it, you have to make some big changes, which hurt sometimes, but that's the only way it's going to be possible. Or you might have to make a decision of, we only live stream the teaching. And that's all we're ever going to stream. And it's going to be wildly inconsistent of when it starts, because we can't guarantee the teaching is going to start at 9 a.m. every Sunday. But that's the only thing that we can afford to stream. And you have to make some of those decisions. And they're going to be hard decisions, but that's what you're going to have to do.
Good. Well, we've been through a lot. Tell me, is there anything else that you would mention for a church that's looking to up their game in streaming? Maybe go from 1 to 2.0 or 3.0?
Yeah. I think too many people get stuck into the gear conversation and into the technical conversation, and they forget about most of the things that I've talked about today. Those are the things that really add value and really matter. We could sit and talk about cameras. We could talk about video switchers. I could talk your ear off about Companion and Stream Decks and how they make your life easier, because they're so much fun and there's so many cool technical things that you can be doing that you do need to have knowledge of how to do those things. But there is an intentionality to what you're doing that you can't accomplish with gear. Gear is never going to help you be more intentional about how you're doing your live stream or about the purpose of why you're streaming. And so many people are going to jump over that intentionality step and just go to, what's the next camera I should buy? What video switcher is better than the one that I have? Which software should I use? Those don't matter. They really don't. The intentionality conversation is going to outlast all of those gear conversations. And so that's really the most important thing that you need to be doing. And I think, honestly, for a lot of churches, you need to take a moment and pause right now when you're in this place of like, okay, people are back in person. Yep, we're going to keep live streaming. You need to pause right now and say, why? Why are we going to keep live streaming? What's the purpose of it? What is it going to look like moving forward? How do we care that people are watching the live stream, or is it only there for people who are sick and can't come in person or are traveling? Or like, what's the level of intentionality that you want to give? Because that's going to inform how many resources do you give towards it? What kind of full-time staff do you put towards it? What kind of volunteer load are you asking for it? All of those things. So I think it's really a great moment right now for churches to pause and answer some of those big questions instead of just barreling forward and trying to make things better. You really need to pause and be more intentional.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time, man. Give us a way that we can either keep up with what you're doing. If it is a Church Media Drop, or is there other ways that we can follow you?
Yeah, I mean, I would love for people, if your church is creating awesome content, you're creating great graphics or videos or audio, any of that stuff, I would love to see you submit it to Church Media Drop. But if your church needs some content, you wish you would have had a better design for Easter, or you're scrambling for Mother's Day, or whatever it might be, man, there are a lot of designs on the website. All of them are editable. We try to create things and give away things in ways that people can repurpose them and use them. So make sure you check out churchmediadrop.com. Tons of different great information on there. And then, you can always find me on YouTube posting new videos for Renewed Vision on ProPresenter. And I'll be at the Philo conference just coming up here. I have no idea when this publishes, so maybe it already happened. But they're teaching and doing consulting and stuff like that. So you can always reach out at churchmediadrop.com and find me there.
Awesome. Well, Brad, thanks so much, man. Really appreciate you.
Yeah, not a problem. Thanks so much for having me.
Hey guys, Carl here. I want to encourage you to check out our YouTube channel and subscribe for all the latest episodes of our podcast, as well as exclusive interviews, training videos, and more for your church, all to help you transform the physical and digital worship experiences at your church. Just go to youtube.com/1230media to subscribe today. That's all spelled out, every single letter, youtube.com/1230media. Come on, subscribe today. What are you waiting for? It's free. Hey guys, before we close out the show today, I want to share a marketing tip from my friend Justin Nava at Mr. Church Marketer. We had Justin on the show a couple of months ago, and I asked him to share a tip about what churches really sound like online. Check this out.
This is Justin from Mr. Church Marketer, and I have one question for you today. Imagine you're at the grocery store and someone walked up to you and said, "Hey, you work or you go to this church down the street, right? Here's the deal. My wife is about to leave me. My kids don't pay attention to me. I'm months behind on my mortgage. I've got massive amounts of debt. My friends don't take me seriously. I can't seem to hold on to a job. Life is so messed up right now. Can you just tell me, is there more to life than this? Am I missing something? Because everything seems hopeless. What do I do? And you looked him right in the eye and you said, have you looked at coming to church on Sunday? We've got life groups for you. And when you give online, you can give safely and securely. Don't forget, and by the way, we've got camp coming up. If you've got kids, we've got camp, and we've got a great women's ministry. And if you just want to hang out and fellowship with us, you're welcome to come to our potluck. Would that be what you would say to that person in that moment at the grocery store? Of course not. You would want to make sure that they are listened, recognized, and felt valuable before you share the gospel to them. Yet this is exactly how our online presence appears. When we do church online or represent our church online, oftentimes we treat it like a promotional platform instead of being a place where people can listen, find value, and find a place for them to connect and find that hope, purpose, and community that we stress so much in person, but don't communicate it online. So my encouragement to you today is quite simply this. Take a look at your online presence, your website, your social media, even your Google listing. Are you looking like you're just hyping yourself up? Or do you look like a place that's open and welcoming to people no matter where they are in life? This can often just appear on the top part. We call this the above the fold of your website. Does it look like something that is welcoming and inviting? Or does it look insidery? Is it full of announcements? Does it make me feel like an outsider? And quite frankly, the easiest way to do this is just to sum up, what would you say to that person in one sentence? Whether they said their life is falling apart, whether they said they're having marital issues, whether they think they're losing their friends, or whether they're struggling with some kind of addiction. What is one sentence that you could say that's a blanket statement for all those scenarios where we can point to the gospel and point to our church or your church as a guide for them finding that hope, purpose, and community? If you want to learn more about this, you can contact me, Justin, at MrChurchMarketer.com. Find that one sentence and put that everywhere. That's your SEO description. That's your headliner. That's your cover image. That's something that you post every week on social media. When you echo that, people will listen and people will come. God bless.
The show notes for this episode are available now at MakingSundayHappen.com.
Well, hey guys, thanks so much for checking out the show this week. Next week on the show, it's a big one as I welcome Carrie Newhoff and Gabe Lyons to the show. Carrie, you know, as the founding pastor of Connexus Church, author, speaker, and Gabe Lyons is the founder of Q. We'll be hearing from both of these guys about what is next for the church. What does the future look like? What we are seeing as trend lines, where things seem to be going, and how to use wisdom to discern where God is leading the church. It is a big one next week on the show. So we are on a mission to help churches and ministries make Sunday happen. If you like today's episode, be sure to like, subscribe, share, do all the things, as it helps us get this content to more and more people around the world. Well, thank you guys so much for hanging out. Go out there and create some incredible worship experiences this weekend. I'll catch you next week.
Making Sunday Happen is a production of the ministry of 1230 Media. For show notes, archive episodes, and more free resources for your church, visit MakingSundayHappen.com.